how to take notes at your D&D or TTRPG table so that you know what the heck is going on in the game. 101 with Emery and Tyler.
Yes.
We are Lore, Love, and Loot. We are a couple that plays D&D and RPGs together, and we are here to share some of our favorite tips and tricks with you. And today is all about note-taking. No, I'm just kidding. So, the most important number one rule about taking notes.
Find a system that works for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
There's plenty of different systems out there. Some don't work. Some you might forget about. You just don't realize that, an hour's gone by, I haven't taken any notes. It could just be the system that you're using. It just might not be working for you.
Mm-hmm. And we're coming at this today from both sides of the table. So currently Tyler's DMing and I'm playing at a table. We have reversed those situations before, but for today we're going to talk as the player and as the DM taking notes at a D&D table. So yeah, finding a system that works for you. Not all brains are made alike.
Nope.
So not all systems are going to work for every player, and you need to find something that works for you. I felt bad. I teased a fellow table mate last night about his notes, and then he perfectly recapped the whole last session based on his 2 pages of ripped out notes from his game session. So, I ate some shame pie. So whatever works for you, and we don't judge. I need to learn that.
Memories are different. Some people's memories work with very short notes. Some people's memories work with, they need a lot of notes. Everyone's a little different that way.
Mm-hmm. Personally, my system has evolved over the years. I dug through my D&D drawer the other day, and I found a whole bunch of my old notes, and I did find these lovely sticky notes that were my notes from my very first game I played. They have things like tentacle in a bag written on them. Not sure the context. This, for me, was not an effective note-taking strategy, but again, for some, might work. So this was my first ever notes. Some people like to write in journals at the table. I have a couple of different ones that I have used for different games. This also works great for some people. What I am doing now is a digital version of notes. Some people use OneNote, some people use Notion. I use a Google Doc to just digitally type out while we're playing what's happening. That works well for me because then I can Control F. If a name comes up, if a scenario comes up, I can highlight things different colors, which we'll get into later. But that's my system as the player at the table. I would say our whole table right now has different note-taking techniques. And as long as you are taking notes, then we're good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking back to what my first note-taking method was, and I realized that it has changed over time, but it's mostly just adapted what I started with. It's worked fairly well. I mostly just use quill books. They kind of save on some table space, so it's not a big folded out book or anything. These have been working great for me, and it's just a little bit of notes, usually quick form. And what I do later is I'll take the notes that I took and then expand them as I need to after the session. And then I write something up, and then I usually run my sessions off of, again, a program like I use OneNote. And then I can read them from there as the session goes on. And then I rinse and repeat.
So what do you take notes on? You've got a book, you've got paper and a binder, you've got sticky notes, you've got OneNote, whatever system works for you. What are you writing down? So let's talk about the obvious first of all. Things like NPC names and where you know them from. So-and-so, say Bob the Builder. Jasper the barkeep. Things like that. Knowing what they're in reference to or how you know them is great. Locations, where you visited, where you need to go, where someone has mentioned that there's a quest hook that's been dropped. Those are important to write down.
It's an interesting piece too when you have a name down. For some, for DMs, it just is that little bit of, hey, as a player, I paid attention and wrote the name down instead of saying, hey, let's go back to that place, the one with the thing.
Yeah,
you could
that
say,
tavern we really like. He's a good guy. I don't know.
right, like
Yeah.
it's so much better if you can remember that name and then in character even, hey, should we go back and see Jasper?
Mhm.
Right, like I don't know, it keeps you immersed, it keeps you in the game, and it helps you feel like your characters are alive in it, right? It's a part of it.
I just feel like it's a respect thing to your DM who has spent hours coming up with these NPCs to try to remember who they are. I'm not perfect. I don't remember them all. But it's an attempt, right, to be respectful in it. I highlight. So I will have different color highlights for locations, NPCs, deities, so that I can easily sort through when I'm looking at my notes what I'm looking for. I will also highlight, and we'll come down to this later, but like I'll highlight like, look at this, or like something's happened, or come back to this, or like that type of thing. So I'm a big user of highlighting in my notes so that I can easily find the information later.
It's funny we didn't even talk about this ahead of time, but I highlight too. I highlight after the fact, I guess, because I'm just doing paper during the game. But in my notes, I'll have a green for this is a monster stat block to look up on what page number in a book. And then I've got a different color for this is an item maybe, or this is a name of a specific thing that's going to happen soon. I highlight too. So it works well.
Next thing you should be writing down are important lore drops. Something about the world that is happening. There is a quest hook. There is the background of a god. There is a riot in a location. These are important things that, again, the DM has taken time to create for us. The least we can do is write it down, remember that it's happened so that we can come back to that scenario. And we'll talk more about that later. But he is gifting us with this information that he has spent so much time coming up with. The least I can do is try to remember it. And my memory is crap. So I need to write it down or it's gone.
Yeah, it's much appreciated when that happens. One of the most exciting moments often as a DM is when you see a character, they heard something in the game, in the session, they go, wait a minute. And they start going, we know this thing about that, and then this connects with this, and oh my goodness, and then there's a big moment, right? It's fun to see those because, I come up with a plot maybe that is interconnected in some way. So it's fun to see them connect the dots when something drops for you.
Yeah. The DM is feeding us information, but he is not the only person at the table. There's a lot of players at the table, and if they drop background lore, their own stories that they've created, I will try to write down things that I need to then like pull the string on. So-and-so mentioned coming from this place and this horrific thing that happened to them. I'm going to come back to that later and talk to them about it so that I'm engaging with A, that player at the table, and B, that player's story and the time they took to build it. Yeah. And I might not remember it later if it's just like, so they just mentioned it at the campfire one night, or like mid-fight yelled something out and you're like, that needs to be talked about. You got to write it down so you can come back to it in moments of quiet or role play moments and beats to engage with your other players.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the DM side, often, depending on what your expectations are, you might get a backstory from a player, and they don't always put everything in the backstory because, you're just making this character for the first time. You come up with different ideas later, and if you get those ideas later and then they reveal them, well, now I might write that down, and something hopefully will then come up with that later. It could be a family tip, it could be a name of a family member, and it would look great if when we go meet them eventually, which we usually do, I remember the names, and then I would remember maybe how they behave or how they might act or something that they might have or a place they know from their past. And I could say, hey, as you walk into town, you recognize that building there because you just mentioned it in an earlier game.
So you as a DM love to drop us multiple quests that we can follow. Yes. And if I or the players at the table were to not be writing those quest hooks down, we would be failing the world. There would be many things that our heroes, our intrepid adventurers, did not accomplish. Thusly, because Bob the Builder told us about them, and we just were like, absolutely, we will go take care of that thing. And then the other thing happened in another city that was more important and had a more final deadline of things, and poor Bob's never going to get anything done for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I like a game that has lots of things going on, and you can't always do everything at once. Sometimes you gotta prioritize and pick what you want to do first, and then, like you mentioned, come back to some of those things later. Just recently, there was a trip to a whole other city, kind of like you mentioned, and then you came back through a town that you'd been in previously, and because you had notes, you remembered, hey, there was one more thing we needed to do. It wasn't time sensitive, but you were able to get back and still do that for one of the NPCs, and be able to fulfill that mission.
I got a nice reward.
Almost died.
Almost died.
Not you, but one of the other characters. Oh, yeah, two of the other characters. But it was
totally worth it.
But it was worth the notes, right? Taking those notes made that important because then it was also an NPC moment, made a connection, and furthered along the story.
And for more advanced note taking, I do this at the end of a game. So I will write down what my character's headspace is at the end of a game. Are they very sad? Are they angry with their brother? Are they so elated? Are they drunk? What is their headspace at the end of the game? What is their feelings toward the other players at the end of the game? Sorry, other characters, not other players. What is their feeling toward the other characters at the table at the end of the game? So that when we drop back in next time, the last thing I see in my notes is where my character should be starting from. Which sometimes it's really hard to drop into that, and we're going to have all sorts of role-playing tips on this channel and things like that, so stay tuned. But subscribe, that's what we're supposed to say, right?
Oh,
Hit the
you're
subscribe.
supposed to put those in there too.
Anyways, if you take notes what's happened at the end of the session, where you're at physically, where you're at mentally, it makes it so much easier to drop back in the next game.
Yes. Yeah.
And kind of takes out that in-betweeny rocky start time.
Yeah, it helps definitely at the beginning of a session. It helps you dive straight into it and kind of avoid that maybe 10, 20 minutes. Sometimes it happens where you kind of are like, well, what happened? And then you kind of, it just takes a while for you to get back into the game. You get to avoid that, or at least reduce it.
Reduce it, yes.
So on the DM side, the note-taking in that respect for NPCs in particular would be when the characters are interacting with an NPC, and let's say that conversation has ended and they're moving on. I'll usually take a quick note for any specific relationships or any specific emotions that NPC is feeling to maybe the whole group or a specific character. There's one character that my wife's character has befriended in the town, and
I was flirting with my husband as a DM.
Yeah, we had an interesting moment, but I took that note because now I know where their relationship is the next time that they talk to each other. Because if you kind of just forget that conversation happened, it could be a little jarring to all of a sudden be like, "Well, we were totally on edge last time," or something, or So
it's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. So when I, let's say they even leave the town and come back, I have that note right in that character's page, that NPC's page, to say, hey, little note, don't trade with them, or don't believe them, or whatever the note might be. So it just helps me start that conversation in the right way, or at least in a good role play way.
So we've talked about the different kinds of ways you can take notes and what you put in those notes, but we haven't talked about the why. There's no point in having a beautiful notebook filled with beautiful highlighted notes if you don't do anything with it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways you can go at using those notes. There's a lot of between character things that you can do with those notes. There's a lot of different things you can do with engaging with the world that you can do with those notes. There's a lot of different little tips and tricks. And do you have any that you've learned along the way?
Read them.
Yeah.
That's my biggest one. Is ever so often I will go back, and I mean, when you're in a long-term campaign, sometimes that means a lot of notes, but I will scan, I will see if there's anything I highlighted a certain color. I will highlight if there's like something we need to be paying attention to, metagame knowledge that I don't know, my character that I know but my character doesn't know, quest hooks that we haven't done yet, and I'll just scroll my notes and make sure that I know those things and they're kind of like on my radar, or things that I want to talk to other characters about. If I just wrote them down and like left, and sometimes, the biggest BBEG of D&D is scheduling. So when you don't get to play for a month and then you have to come back in and drop in and being like, What were we supposed to do? What was that quest hook from 2.5 months ago? So yeah, my biggest tip is to review your notes, to read them and go back over them, which is why I suggest things like highlighting and things like that. So you're not reading bulk amounts of text. You're finding the highlights.
Yeah, and I imagine, actually, I haven't seen your notes, but I imagine they're mostly point form.
Yes.
Like, keep them short, keep them to the point. Too much fluff is going to make you potentially avoid reading your notes too, because then there's just too much, right? So keep it short, keep it sweet. Just take down what you need, and then maybe some extra if you feel like you might need it, just in case, because you never know what little piece could be important. On the DM side, I mean, notes I find are crucial in helping, obviously, during the session, but very, very important for planning for the next session. The notes that I take will end a night with, again, on my little notepad here, a bunch of notes, maybe a page or two front and back, depends on what happens in the session. Sometimes lots, sometimes not a lot. Sometimes I sit back and just listen. But those notes then I will take and write a recap and write down all the important parts that were there. I will usually put a note down, hey, review that backstory because I needed to, brush up on it or something. So a few notes for myself to help me prep for the next session. And again, if it's been a month since we've played and I want to go look at my notes and I go, oh no, what happened? I try to, within the next day of playing the session, take these notes from my book and put them into OneNote so that I've got them there and I've got all the points that I need to make for the next time that I sit down to plan the next session. There's plenty of little bits that wherever they ended off on is a good place to go, well, I know we're starting there, so how do I go from there? Right.
So in order to be very respectful of your DM and other players at the table, it's a great practice to get into, taking some notes at the table while you're playing, reviewing those notes, knowing where you're starting your session and all of that stuff so that you can show up as a good player at your table. And if you want more tips and tricks about showing up as a good player at your table, you can check out our video on D&D player tips that we posted recently, as well as stay tuned as we're going to talk about all the mistakes we made at our first couple tables. And so that's a really great practice in what not to do. So we will see you soon. Thanks for tuning in.
Would be to say, hey, this character is... Yep, should have kicked her out.
Yeah, we have a visitor. Are you going to be the star bar?
Guess we could let them run around in the video.
Well, they'll be the stars.